Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring what has become pretty much the staple of all competitive play. With competitive play is of course played at tier 8, and the most popular DD by far is the Benson, although the Loyang has been seeing a lot of popularity as of late. Anyway, the Benson itself, well, the matchmaking, not too bad, tier 8. I mean, the enemy does have one radar, New Orleans. That's always something, especially when you play DDs, one of the first things to check, just like I mentioned in my Farragut commentary, you check how many radars they have. Then you check if they have a carrier, then you check DD threats. And in this case, they have an Akizuki, which can, in a straight up fight, beat me. And they have a Loyang, which of course can beat me with the help of Hydro. So those are the two threats we have to consider. I'm push up to support. I'm a bit surprised the Kiev is pushing for B. Doing this in a Russian DD is not recommended because they are not really cappers, and pushing in and smoking and capping is also highly questionable, considering we don't really know where their Loyang is. If it smokes up and the Loyang pushes in with Hydro, rip Kiev. So, very questionable rush into B from that Kiev. He might get away with it, but still, just because it works doesn't mean it's a smart move. I don't care what anyone else says. If something is dumb and it happens to work, it's still goddamn dumb. Because the fundamental point is, you want to avoid risks in this game. You want to make low risk maneuvers unless you are forced to make high risks ones, because the score is in the enemy's favor. So in general, that kind of move is not recommended. I do see Nakatsuki is spotted trying to cap B, so I of course go here to contest. Now, what is the fundamental point of USDDs? Well, they are hybrids. They are great. They are good gunboats and they are good torpedo boats. Well, at lower tiers they are pretty bad, the torpedo boats, but then as you go up in tiers they get better and better. The torpedoes get harder hitting, faster reload, so forth. And the Benson, well, the torpedoes are quite hard hitting. The upgraded torps, they do about what, 16-17k damage. But the biggest problem is really the cooldown on the torpedoes. It is massive. It's 122 seconds, which is of course a 2-minute cooldown on the torpedoes. So the torpedoes are stealthy, and you get 10 of them that you can launch, but the big downsides are they are very slow, 55 knots, and they have a massive cooldown. They are, however, very hard to detect, so they can catch people by surprise quite easily. The Akatsuki smoke fades, which was kind of what I was waiting for, and here we see of course another of the advantages of the Benson or USDDs in general, and that is of course the amazing firepower that you have. Very fast reloading guns. The shell arcs take some getting used to, because at longer distances they are extremely lazy, but it's still very powerful. Now I turn away an angle because I expect of course torpedoes, and I don't want to get stuck there within radar range of the New Orleans. Having to slow down and dodge torpedoes and be within radar range of the New Orleans, that's a high risk. And as we said, we want to avoid high risk situations. So we first dodge the torpedoes, and now we start harassing the shores, and note we are staying kind of outside the range of that radar. The radar range is what, 8.5 on the New Orleans, so we're trying to stay out of it. And we are using these guns to just harass the shores. The arcs, as you can see, really float the arcs. This is only 8.5 km away, really float the arcs, but the DPM is no joke. You have a lot of firepower, especially of course if you run the B hull. In competitive, of course, Benson C hull is the recommended one because it gives you defensive AA, which helps protect against carriers and carrier spotting. But in randoms, I recommend the B hull, and the reason for that is of course you have to give up a turret to get the C hull. On the Fletcher, for example, you can slot defensive AA without having to trade away any turrets, but on the Benson it means trading away that 5th turret for that defensive AA. And because good carriers are so very rare, carriers that are good enough to cross torp you that require defensive AA to counter are so extremely rare in random battles that I do not recommend that. So the shores is forced away, and I push into the cap. Note that I am angled away from the New Orleans, so if the New Orleans decides to radar me, I'm aimed away, and I have a clear path ahead of me that I can just straight up flee if it tries to push in with radar. So instead I try to cap and I harass the shores a bit, but I'm constantly keeping an eye out. If the New Orleans decides to push me, I just go full speed ahead and I can duck behind these islands in front of me. So you always have an escape path. like assume the enemy will radar you and plan ahead. What is your plan? If this guy radars me, how do I get out of this alive? Smoke starts to fade, but it looks pretty damn safe. The New Orleans is still hiding behind the island, which is perfect for me because that gives me the opportunity to capture this objective. In fact, the New Orleans is now spotted very far away, and that is good. Shores is shooting at someone else, and since I'm about to move into cover, nothing is really stopping me from throwing a few harassing volleys his way. I mean, 1k damage, switch to AP to do some additional 2k, now we've done a bitter 2k damage. This kind of harassment is useful, especially as long as it's not aiming at me. The Benson has great acceleration, especially since I run the acceleration mod as well, so by the time he finally shoots at me, I can reverse to dodge the majority of it. I'm gonna see if I can maybe get this kill. He is of course fleeing, not surprising. Another volley, this time I accelerate. With the speed boost module, not with the speed boost, with the acceleration module or upgrade and the speed boost that you have available, you can actually change courses extremely quickly. And it can be quite annoying for enemy ships to shoot you. At those close ranges, as the Shores was shooting, he doesn't have too many issues hitting me, but the longer distance you are, the harder of a time they have. I land some torps on the Bayern that I shot off earlier. You kind of want to use these torps as whenever they are available, because the cooldown is already so massive. Now, of course, you have to put some thought into them. Don't just launch mindlessly terrible torpedoes, but the 2-minute cooldown means that you don't really want to spend too much downtime looking for the perfect torpedoes, because if you do, you're going to end up launching so very few torps per game. Because the massive cooldown, and then if you spend a minute looking for that perfect torpedo opportunity, and the torps have a 2-minute cooldown, we're launching 1 volley per 3 minutes. And that is not a lot of torpedo threat and not a lot of power. In fact, I just helped get that Bayern killed because I got a flooding on him, he had to repair, and then the flint burned him down. So that's the kind of pressure you can put and help your team out significantly. I didn't even bother staying there, I just torped and then I left and moved on to the next point, because the fundamental role of the Benson in random battles is of course capture control. You know that I went to A, I killed DD, then I went to B, make sure it's defended and held, and ultimately my goal is of course to move on to C and help capture that one. Not just because it's good for the team, capping wins you games, but because it's great XP. Capping gives you XP, tons of XP. Solo caps are fantastic. That's why you want to do it. That's why you want to sail around in these caps. You want to get that cap XP. Note, as long as this Edinburgh isn't shooting at me, I have no intention of smoking up. Only now when he starts focusing me do I even start considering it, but he's already so close to going behind the island that I don't bother smoking here. There's nothing for me to shoot. So I rather angle and tank and get behind island in cover instead. And we have our next opportunity for torpedoes. I want to launch them quickly before those planes arrive and spot me, because if you are plane spotted and you launch torpedoes, then your torpedoes are automatically spotted. And once the torpedo is spotted, it's spotted the entire way through. So it looks like this carrier might be trying to drop me, but as I mentioned, there are so few good carriers that warrant the use of defensive AA. Most of the time your fantastic maneuverability is more than enough to allow you to dodge torpedoes. You can either turn into the torpedoes or you can turn away from them. In this case I turned away because there's fighters coming, so I got backup coming my way. Note that as I slow down here, I also smoke. The reason why I don't want to keep sailing is sailing with torpedoes on both sides of you makes you very predictable. It's very easy for the enemies to predict where you're going to sail your DD if you have torps on both sides, because obviously you can't turn left or you can't turn right. So when your torps are being dropped from behind you and they are passing by on both sides, my recommendation is honestly doing what I just did there, and that is slow down, smoke up. You slow down to allow them to pass by you, to get rid of that get rid of the threat that is hindering your movement, and then you smoke up, because if you slow down you of course become an easy target. So in that way you mitigate the threat entirely. And this of course is a pretty damn good spot to smoke up. I did land some torps on the Scharnhorst, which we launched much earlier, but these Royal Navy cruisers are of course extremely squishy. I angled preemptively against the Edinburgh because I knew he would most likely torp me. I mean, if you see a DD smoke up in front of you, of course you're gonna torp him. I am still trying to keep him my distance in case he tries to push him with Hydro, but looking at the minimap we have so much scouting that it's unlikely that he can leave his smoke and try to push me with Hydro. But you need to keep that in mind. If a Royal Navy cruiser smokes up and you smoke up as well, you need something to give you vision between you and him so he can't just sneak across the open space and push you with Hydro. Because Royal Navy cruisers melt DDs. Their short fuse AP activates when they shoot you, and if you give them broadside they can deal massive damage per volley. So in general you don't want to be picking any fair fights with them. You want to be picking the type of fights I'm doing here, which is from smoke. I launch torps on the Edinburgh and I push out because I know there's a DD somewhere here. I really want to see where this DD is. Note that I shot before I left the smoke, so that means I'm undetected now, even though my shells landed after I left it. And I do in fact find the Akatsuki. I wanted to find the DD because he was spotted earlier. So I start by dealing with the easy kill, which is the Akatsuki, and I kill him off. And meanwhile my torps on the Edinburgh kill him, so I get my double strike. And only now do I focus on the Fiji that I forced to repair earlier, and I kill him as well, which would have been of course a triple strike. But in this case, well, I got a Kraken as a consolation prize. And at this point, well, they don't really have much left. It was about 6 versus 5 or something, but then I killed so many in a row that the game kind of spiraled, and they only really have their DD left, oh sorry, their carrier left, and he is defo going down. So the game ends, and overall it was quite a nice game. I mean, I only got 1 full cap, but the contribution shows 16.4k XP, which is of course very rewarding. Only 7 torpedo hits, but you shouldn't really count too heavily on torpedo hits on the Benson. On the Fletcher you start becoming a huge torpedo threat because your torp reload goes down so much. And not only do you have enough captain points to probably spec into torpedo reload, you also get the 9 million upgrade module to reduce the cooldown, and in general the cooldown just goes down. So you have much fast. You're much better torpedo boat than the Benson is. The Benson's 2 minutes torpedo cooldown means that you really have to be measured and calm with your torpedoes, and you can have really unfortunate games where you don't land many of them. However, usually you can make it up with smoke and gun power. Looking at the team score, 2.5k, which is a pretty nice base score. 5 kills of course, and do manage to top the scoreboard, which is always satisfying as a DD player. And detailed report, as I said, even though we landed 7 torps, it did 71k damage. In comparison, our guns did what? 54k plus fires, 7k, so 61k. So even with 7 torps landed, we still almost did half our damage in gun power. And that's something you need to keep in mind. You want to be using your guns as much as possible. Of course you want to do it from safety, from smoke and so forth, but whenever possible, whenever smoked up and you have the opportunity to use your guns, use them. It's absolutely one of the USDD strengths, is that pure firepower that you have available. So 50-50 is kind of what you can expect. When you get to the Fletcher, you tend to start getting a lot more torpedo damage. Gearing, it kind of shifts the other way again, because the Gearing has such a long torpedo reload and it has such good guns. But overall, guns and torps are always going to have a pretty equal share across the entire USDD line. Of course, lower tiers, when you kind of only can YOLO torp, you can get these really lopsided games. But on the Benson especially, it tends to be very equally divided. And here's of course the detail or the credits and XP, and of course I'm running a lot of bonus flags on the Russian, well, a lot of them. Ocean Soldier camo for some bonus, the Red Dragon that I got from a super container, and the basic equal speed. So that of course adds up a lot of XP and a lot of Captain XP. USDDs especially scale extremely well with Captain perks, so the more you get, the stronger they become. Speaking of Captain perks, let's move on to my recommended Captain build. Now, as usual, I will start with the modules. Now, the first order of priority is absolutely getting the hull upgrade, followed by the torpedoes. You want the hull because not only does it give you, of course, the additional health that you so badly crave, but it also gives you better rudder shift, which is, of course, extremely important for any destroyer. So get the hull upgrade, followed by the torpedo upgrade. and after which you can get the range upgrade, which of course is helpful but not nearly as valuable as upgrading the torpedoes, because the difference in damage is so massive. You gain a flat out 5000 damage on the torps, and considering they do 11.6 before this, the increased damage is very substantial. You can go into the Sea Hull, but I don't really rate it, because you have to. The whole point of the Sea Hull is, of course, that you'll be able to slot defensive AA as the consumable instead of speed boost. But the problem is that you don't really want to do that, because, well, speed boost is just fine at tier 8, and also you give up a turret. That's really the big thing. You give up a turret if you slot it. You go from 5 turrets to 4, which makes it a lot less useful. Later on the Fletcher, for example, you can slot defensive AA without having to give up the speed boost, and that's when it becomes worth it, because you get this great additional consumable to help you with no real trade-offs. But if you want to slot defensive AA, you have to slot the Sea Hull, which means giving up a turret, which is why for random battles I don't rate it. In competitive, pretty much everyone runs Sea Hull, of course, but random battles are certainly not the same thing as competitive gameplay. Consumable-wise, I would recommend Premium Damage Control and Premium Smoke, especially since I don't really run Superintendent for random battles, especially on Russian server where I'm playing solo. So I highly recommend running the Premium Smoke for shorter cooldown and the additional charge. And if you do run Premium Engine Boost, that's entirely up to you. I like it because I have the money to do it, but if you don't, save some money there. Upgrade-wise, main armaments mod 1, turret and torpedo survivability. Bitter dispersion. Now, first of all, main battery is of course useless since USDDs have insanely good turret traverse. AA guns mod, once again, considering we're not going defensive AA, and in general, you rarely find it that useful on a DD, especially on a B-hull Benson. It's of course completely pointless. So we go aiming system, engine survivability. If you have a speed boost module, I guess it would be okay, but honestly, USDDs don't really need it that much. Even when we run a speed boost, survivability is usually more important than that enhanced speed boost. And propulsion mod, that is of course when we have the B-hull, we already get an extremely good rudder shift of 2.7 seconds. So increasing this by 20% is kind of pointless, because you're not really going to notice any difference between a 2.7 rudder shift and what is it, a 2.2, 2.3. You're not really going to notice much of a difference there. Whereas adding the increased acceleration is highly useful, considering how much time you spend firing from smokes in USDDs. You spend a lot of times just shooting in smokes in random battles, and having this faster acceleration for dodging torps, or in case you get radared, hydra'd, whatever, is extremely useful. Finally, of course, improved concealment, bread and butter of USDDs, since you want to be able to knife fight other DDs. Captain perks wise, priority 1 is of course preventive maintenance. When you are knife fighting DDs, keeping your turrets and torpedoes healthy, engine healthy, so forth, is extremely valuable. Last stand, for the same reason, you find yourself pushing caps a lot, you find yourself fighting other DDs a lot. You don't want to be fighting a lot in a DD without last stand, that's just suicide. Additional survivability and concealment, that's the basic 10-point build. After that, I would recommend, as soon as you get 12 points, you get Adrenaline Rush, because the USDDs of course scale so well. You go in, you fight the DD, you're half health, suddenly you have gained a 10% bonus to both reload on torpedoes and main guns. Like, it's just a massive bonus that usually benefits you very, very quickly. I currently have priority target, but I don't really rate it. In fact, my ultimate USDD build involves getting faster torpedo reload, because of course the torpedo reload is so very slow, especially on the gearing and on the Benson, both which benefit greatly. The Fletcher of course benefits as well, don't get me wrong, but the Fletcher does have a fairly fast reloading torpedoes. And finally, I like getting RPF or radio location, because, well, you are fighting mostly other DDs in the early game, and getting that early RPF advantage is very useful. But I only get a radio location with the last 4 points, so priority after you get adrenaline, then get torpedo reload, and then spec into it. Now, if you don't want torpedo reload, for example, if you division up a lot, you play a lot with teammates, you play a lot in division, then instead of getting torpedo, superintendent is of course amazing, because that additional smoke is so very useful, because your smokes are so very powerful. However, with the upcoming smoke nerf, that's of course gonna lose a lot of value, and so my current build, which is more solo focused, is probably going to be even more valuable once the smoke nerf really kicks in. Anyway, that was my, well, I can show you actually the flags. Priority 1 is of course detonation, speed, both are amazing. Faster cooldown on smoke is pretty good if you got this to spare. Additional fire chance, always okay, but honestly the two flags you should worry about is speed and detonation. Those are the two that you can really care about. Anyway, that was my Benson commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.